Doom Eternal has a decent amount of very cool and interesting content in the game. The game is packed with interesting enemies, environments, levels, weapons, and more. But something that is more interesting than that would be the cut content of the game. If you take a look online, then you can find a wealth of content that has been cut from Doom Eternal, and some of it is very interesting to take a look at. So, in my search through the internet to find some cut content from the game, I have narrowed it down and gathered up some of the stuff that I think would be interesting to take a look at in this video. Because I think this stuff is actually really cool, and I wanted to share it with all of you. So, as I get this very short intro out of the way, let's begin with the video. So, we're gonna start off with the stuff that'll probably make you pretty annoyed, or just a bit disappointed. So, at this point we've basically all seen Immora, the last full level in Doom Eternal's second expansion, The Ancient Gods Part 2. Now, Immora is a pretty cool level, and the visuals are a real spectacle, especially at the start, but something about it just fell a bit off. Many people put it down to the fact that it kinda looked like a red version of the level Urdak from late in the game's main campaign. But what if I told you the Immora we could have had may have just been exactly what you wanted? You can really see how great Immora could have been in the concept art for the level. It has a much more hellish look to it and overall feels a lot more unique than what we got in the final game. You can see the similarities with the maker architecture seen in Urdak, but overall it looks a lot less like a recoloring of a previous level. It really has an evil look to it, and it's the kind of place that I could imagine being the capital city of hell. Like I said, the version in the game is pretty cool, but the stuff we can see in this concept art, in my opinion, is just a lot better. And I really wish that id Software had the time and resources during the development of The Ancient Gods Part 2 to have been able to make this happen. But you know how I just mentioned the makers just a second ago? Well, let's move on to some even weirder stuff. The makers were a big part of Doom Eternal's main campaign, and are a really cool depiction of angels and heaven, but some of the scrap designs for the makers are very, very bizarre, and the more of them that we look at, the weirder they get. These designs are odd, but the middle one is about the closest thing that we have to the final version that we can see here. I love these designs, and they look like they would have made some really cool new enemies for when you get to Urdak. If Urdak had a whole selection of new enemies, and not just the maker drones, then it would have been an even more interesting part of the game in my opinion. These designs are where it gets a bit weirder, as these takes on the makers are more humanoid, and almost look like what you would imagine to be underneath the first bunch that we had a look at. No insult meant to the artist here, as I think they are really good drawings, but I'm happy that this wasn't what we got in the final game, as they wouldn't have really fit in my opinion. This version of the makers looks a lot less angel-like, and more like some of the armor that we've seen in Doom 2016's multiplayer. Again, just like with the last ones, I don't really think that these would have fit with what they were trying to go with the makers. But it would be really cool to see these reworked into demonic energies for a future Doom title, as I feel like they could have a lot of potential. I don't really know what to say about these ones. They remind me a lot of H.R. Giger's work, such as Alien. I'm mostly on about the two on the top and the one on the bottom right. This guy in the bottom left I don't really have much to say about either. But let's move on to something that's actually pretty cool. Here we see some different versions of the carcass that, while different, still share some of the similarities with the one in the final game. And I think a few of these could actually be reworked into some pretty cool new enemies, if they were separate from the carcass itself. This is where it begins to get weird again. You may look at these and say, oh, I wonder what that was meant to be, but we're still on the topic of the carcass. Yes, this really was a design that they could have used for the carcass. And to be fair, just like a few of the other scrap designs we've already seen, I think this could have been reworked into a pretty interesting new enemy. Again, this is another odd version of the carcass that I want to show you. By the looks of it, the really annoying ground attack that it does would have been its own arm, which I think would have been really cool to see. Another thing I would like to show you quickly is what the Cursed Prowler could have been. As we all know, the Cursed Prowler was pretty disappointing in terms of how it looked, as it was just a recoloring of the normal Prowler. But here we see it could have been more of a cyber prowler, or it could have had more armoured looking design, which would explain its resistance to your weapons once you've been cursed. Now, this here is something I think is really interesting. So, you know those titans that we can see carrying the big temple things at the beginning of Doom Eternal's main campaign? Well, here we see some scrap designs of some other creatures that could have been doing this job instead. These things look really cool, and look like something out of Pacific Rim, or that one Godzilla movie where you can barely see anything. Again, here's a larger version of the creatures. Now, moving on to what is probably my favourite ones to look at. The boss fights of Doom Eternal may be one of my favourite things about the game, not only for how they play, but also their designs. From the Doom Hunter to the Icon of Sin, all of Doom Eternal's bosses have unique, fun and interesting designs. But here I have some designs that didn't quite make it into the game. The Doom Hunter's scrap designs are still very similar to what we see in the final game, but there is a few differences that I would like to touch on. Something that a lot of people may have noticed about the Doom Hunter is that he seems to take a lot of influence from Doom 3's Sarge, which may be why there's a tiny bit of Doom 3's music that gets played just before the fight. But yeah, the Doom Hunter is similar to Sarge, and that point is proven even further by the fact that this version of the Doom Hunter in this concept art is on tank treads, just like Sarge was in Doom 3. Next up we have a pretty cool version of the Marauder that never made it into the game. I think that id Software could make use of this in a future title by making a more difficult version of the Marauder, maybe for a larger boss fight at some point, because I think that would be really fun. Now, the Gladiator has some of the coolest scrap designs, and that is why I've left him for the end. Here we can see two much more robotic looking versions of him, and just like with a few others on this list, I think this could have been reworked into a brand new enemy. This version on the left here looks a lot more like the final version, and the only difference is that he's missing an eye patch, and that the shield is much smaller than it is in the game's boss fight. However, this guy on the right looks a lot less like a demon and more like a troll in my opinion. This looks like something that would belong in a different game, but like I've said a few hundred times in this video already, I think it would be possible to rework this into a new enemy. But what do you think? Are these designs cool? Should they be in the game? Or is it a good thing that they were scrapped? Let me know in the comments down below. And while you're there, I highly recommend liking this video and subscribing to the channel, as it helps push this video out to more people who may find it interesting. If you found any more cut content and would like to share it with others, and potentially lead to another one of these videos, then be sure to join my Discord server and share it with the people there. I'll be sure to have a look as well. If you want to support the channel even more and see more videos like this, then I would recommend checking out my merch store, as it's a great way to restock on clothing and other items such as phone cases and much more. If you want to watch any more of my content right now, then I would recommend checking out my last video. That's there on the left. And also you can have a look at my video where I spoke about why Classic Doom is the greatest of all time. That's up there on the right. But now that I've gotten all that out of the way, thank you all for watching, and as always, have a nice day.